see.
Hello.
Hello, Gregor.
Awesome.
Gregor will talk as director of the Swarm Foundation. He will talk about the opportunities with Fairdrive. Fairdrive is, well, of course, Gregor could explain it far better. Combined with FireOS, it allows developers to build thin apps or thin dApps on Swarm with ease. Is the description you gave. I'm very excited to hear about this. So please take it away, Gregor.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Just a second. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So welcome everybody. It's great to be here, and also it's a humbling and a bit also intimidating experience to be in this awesome company of all the speakers. So it's really hard to feel the shoes of the previous talks. I will try to address more the layers on top of Swarm and how they interact with Swarm, how they address dApp development and also protocol development. If I use Victor's metaphor of the piping, I guess we will be speaking more about the pipes, spas, saunas, bathrooms, and pools, and so forth. So let's just jump in immediately. Today, I won't be, usually those who know me know that I speak a lot about values and ethics and things like that. I won't be speaking about these topics today. Also, recently, I gave a talk at ETCC. There, I was addressing how we can empower digital freedom through collaboration. We will tackle more, as I mentioned, the other layers, and hopefully there are also interesting information for you. If there are any questions, just let me know, and we can either address it during the talk or at the end during Q&A. So to give an overview of the talk, first we'll touch upon the world today and the importance of privacy, data interoperability, and data sovereignty. Then also, as you know, we are part of the Ethereum ecosystem. We are sharing the same origins. Swarm has been incubated under Ethereum Foundation for several years before graduating on its own. We will also have a quick look what we can learn already from Ethereum and how we can apply this to Swarm. Then we will touch upon very briefly what is Fairdata economy, what is Fairdata stack, going towards Fairdrive, the project, and how to grow your dApp adoption by using it. At the end, we will also conclude with a couple of examples, and maybe there will be time left to also do a little bit of brainstorming what kind of dApps could be built and what kind of dApp future we could see. So let's just dive in. I mean, it's I guess one could say that even the birds on the trees are already singing in ones and zeros today. So we live in a data-driven society fueled by data, mostly by personal data. Moreover, we also live in a very addictive world. You know, it's like even with all the social media apps, with the games going on, it's addictive is the buzzword. It's the adjective that kind of announces if a project will be successful or not. And for this, we can basically use the common term being used, dopamine economy. This is, in a way, for me personally, it's worrying. So an example here that I'm giving is if you go to Bali. These days it's a little bit difficult because of COVID. You do a search for a tour, and the most popular tourist tour is Instagram tour. So you can cover the whole of Bali in one day by visiting just the Instagram worthy sites. this shows us how we actually, how the digital and physical have merged, how actually the digital is dictating even our behavior in the physical. And it's, yeah, it's mildly put, it's concerning. So maybe here, just as an intermezzo, an interesting video, what these kind of apps are doing to us. Here we see, I wouldn't say a typical user of Instagram, but we could say a typical behavior. Looks like quite a power user, doesn't it?
Hanging out with girls on the beach. Oh, touching snakes, that's always dangerous.
And so forth. So we can share the video, the rest of the video afterwards. It's quite interesting to see. But basically, why I'm showing this is because it shows the methods, that the approaches that are being used go basically down to our physiological core, the core that we also share with other primates. So some scholars say that the world is going even so far that it's not just, you know, about age of surveillance, about surveilling us, but it's actually kind of like an automation. So the apps designed actually we do what they dictate us. Sarah Speakerman, who wrote the Digitale Ethic book, she's claiming that the devices have got a life of their own, constantly interrupting us with notifications and telling us what to do when. So in this sense, surveillance capitalism, one could say, is just the beginning. Some term that is also being used is that we are kind of drifting into data slavery powered by the combination of surveillance capitalism and dopamine economy. And here we can remind ourselves of the great talk Alexei had on Monday, speaking about digital integrity. And we see our digital integrity is eroding away. Data slavery essentially is about taking away our autonomy. Moreover, it is changing us profoundly. If you have more trouble focusing today as you had 5 to 10 years ago, this is not age related. So what's the antidote? It's, in our opinion, it's combination of data sovereignty and privacy are the bedrock of freedom. Here, this is also aligned with, again, referencing back Alexei, where he was arguing that we need first anonymity, on top of which we can build new solutions. Now, data sovereignty is enabled by data interoperability. It's the opposite of data silences. Data interoperability enables us, gives us agency over our data, but it's not that easy. It's because while we might be aligned in thinking about the importance of privacy, we actually, as Fermin the Brander in the book Life After Privacy says, we are basically living a confessional culture. So on one side, privacy seems important, but on the other side, we are just giving it away. We are just oversharing more and more. So in this sense, we could even say that privacy is a social challenge. These are exactly the topics that we are trying to going to address today in the talk, and how we as developers, how we can tackle this, how maybe we can shape a solution that it's a win-win, where the user experience on one side is not deteriorated, but at the same time, our autonomy is preserved. This is in a way also aligned with what Victor just said, when a swarm goes into the background and we don't notice swarm running in the background, but we should feel more free. So going forward, it's definitely an uncharted territory. And here the question poses itself, what can we learn also from Ethereum by moving forward? I would say a lot. here are just some of the topics, and in this sense, we can see the transforming power of the ecosystem. This is also evident where we see this great interaction between infrastructure and the application layer. It's one is driving the other. First there was Ethereum, then the rise of the dApps started to dictate technological requirements, which then came back to Ethereum, formulated as the Ethereum's scalability problem. We see new solutions emerging. With the new solutions emerging, we see new products like better user experience of decentralized exchanges and so forth. So, and in this sense, also, when we think of Swarm, we shouldn't be thinking of Swarm as an isolated island. It's Swarm comes alive with the application layer. It's Swarm comes alive with the ecosystem. And sometimes you can also hear some of our team members basically saying we are all Swarm. And this is exactly what we mean with this. Now, the other thing, what we can learn from Ethereum is that it redefines the tech stack. So the new stack, as Joel Monegro put it, can be summarized as fat protocols and thin applications. It's basically a crypto services architecture that it's kind of likened to the microservices architecture, just as a sovereign one. Moreover, when we look at the DeFi, we see how the money Legos, as they're being called in the DeFi, different protocols and dApps, how they work with each other. One app, one dApp, one protocol can help the other, and so forth. And this is very much linked to what it's called bring your own data. It's we are witnessing a new paradigm change in the sense that applications are not anymore like these self-containing silos as the applications on the iPhone, which holds the algorithms, UI, and the data. No, it has become unbundled. So in the DeFi space, it's easy. With my keys, I can move from one dApp to the other. If I started some, let's say in DeFi, some maker action in one dApp, I can continue with my maker loan in the other, and vice versa. However, with Swarm naturally extends the blockchain in terms of data. When the data, there's bigger data in question, when it's private data in question, things become more complicated, and we will look more into that. So the new stack, in this sense, it's also kind of defined what, if I continue with the DeFi example, we see Ethereum mainnet as this fat protocol. It demands a lot of collective effort. It demands a lot of time, a lot of development, research. It's not easy to do. Then we have the second layer. We see different protocols as the mentioned Maker or Compound, Uniswap, etc. And then on top of this, we see then a plethora of all kinds of food-related apps and dApps and so forth. And this kind of stack can also very nicely translate into Swarm, albeit with a little bit of a different function. So at this point, I need to actually make a stop and go a little bit into the topic of what is actually Fairdata, to provide some context. Fairdata, in a simple term, could be even said like it's like digital fair trade. You know, when we think about fair trade, somebody buys fair trade coffee, we maybe don't know the details about it, but we kind of know that, okay, this coffee was sourced in a more fair and ethical way, and essentially meaning that the distribution of value is more fair, that there's no exploitation of the individual, and that human rights are protected. In a similar way, we can apply the concept of fair data to the online world. There is one huge difference, though. When we buy fair trade coffee, we think of maybe some people we don't know in, let's say, developing countries. With fair data applies to everybody who's online. Fair data applies to you, it applies to me, it applies to all of us who can participate in this call. So that's about Fairdata. But now, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean for the topic we are discussing? It means that Fairdata can somehow is shaping itself as an emerging alternative to surveillance capitalism. It's quite easy to figure out that Facebook is not Fairdata. Maybe then here the question is, but you know, why should Swarm be concerned with that? As Victor put it very nicely in the metaphor of the narrow waist, Swarm kind of being similar to TCP/IP. TCP/IP is neutral. TCP/IP just deals with packets of data, and so is Swarm. However, it's also, I think we can argue that especially decentralized technology is not neutral. Decentralized technology does represent values, and also as Swarm developers, we do not want to recreate the same problems. We do not want to recreate the same broken internet, as Elat has put it yesterday in the talk, but we are highly motivated to provide an alternative. So in this sense, it's also important for us that we support and educate and kind of incentivize towards that direction. Now, we can accelerate fair data economy through the fair data stack incentives. It's essentially, it's like we can look at Swarm as the base layer, as the Web3's backend or the narrow waist. On top of this layer, so this would be the equivalent of the Ethereum mainnet. On top of this layer, there are like various protocols. Victor mentioned some. Today we are speaking about Fairdrive. These kind of protocols, and there can be more, and there will be more, can facilitate data interoperability. They can strengthen privacy, and they can promote ethics. It's if we speak about here the Fair Data Society ecosystem initiative, it's where the tech meets the social in a way. And then the third layer can be then the thin applications that use these data Legos to build new, better, and even more data-rich experiences that also respect and protect human rights. So here is maybe a little bit of a visual representation, and here to make it maybe things a bit more clear, how does this relate to the world we are living in? I will use the so-called farmers market metaphor. Now, Victor mentioned Swarm is the piping, could be considered the piping. In this metaphor, we could say Swarm is the physical marketplace itself, is the space where the farmers market is happening. Then the next layer could be the farmers market on its own, which is, when we look at it, it's decentralized. Diversity helps it. The more different sellers of veggies and fruits there are, the better. The more diversity is, the better. So, and I, as a user, I can go to the farmer's market. I can buy the ingredients I want in my own privacy. Essentially go home and also make the most terrible lunch. You know, maybe I can make like mixed things together nobody would eat, but it's my freedom to do it. Now the layer on top of it, the thin applications, can be considered as the restaurants. Restaurants on the other side, they also go and source their ingredients on the farmer's market. So they go to this layer, but they are opinionated through their menus. A pizza place is opinionated. A vegan place is very much opinionated. So, and so are also other types of restaurants. Now, the problem that we have today is that we have only restaurants. And this is where basically Swarm comes in, and this is why it's important that we also support and work together with the ecosystem. Now, the question that poses to itself is, what if there would be a protocol that actually can connect like these different personal data stores, and at the same time leaves also space for creativity of the dApps? And the answer that we see is called Fairdrive. Fairdrive, in essence, when we speak about personal data, about web development, is a digital safe space. It's on purpose, and it can only be an ecosystem initiative. It's about the diversity. It's about collaboration. We can only build this together. For a quick overview, there are two parts to the Fairdrive project. One is the protocol, one is the DApp. I will explain more about both of them in the next slides. And it can be seen as the protocol. It's kind of like serving the role of the backend for developers, while the DApp is the personal data store for the users. At the same time, it is designed in such a way that we can argue it's ethical design. It's aligned with the so-called Fairdata Society principles, which are essentially about recognizing digital integrity of the human person. What, again, Alexi was opening the summer school with. Moreover, Fairdrive as a project is designed to be a multi-ecosystem approach, because here the question is, if we say that we want to provide the best value for the user, this and the problems that we face today in the world, these are bigger than Swarm. It's also other projects are addressing it in this or the other way, and it's about here also collaboration and connecting beyond the boundaries of Swarm itself. Fairdrive right now is a sandbox project for Fairdata economy. Even the Fairdata economy, if we think away the tech part, is still not being defined. As society, as we've seen in the previous talks, we are trying to find the solutions. We are challenging the current social constructs in order to find better solutions. So let's dive in more a bit, like what is Fairdrive protocol? Fairdrive protocol has the goals are essentially to manage various permissions for dApps to access data. It's about supporting common standards like context and calendar. This is not exclusive data to any of the app. I would argue none of the data is exclusive to any of the app. It's about setting best practices, how to secure the access so that, in other words, we don't leak the data. It's giving special attention exactly for these reasons, how to granting and renewing and revoking permissions. It's about long-term organizing and labeling the data, not just personal data, but all the data. That it's not about only reclaiming the privacy, but that the data can work together. What I mean with this is in the blockchain space, there is shared understanding or shared value that, as I mentioned before, bring your own data. The data belongs to the user, but this is not enough. It's good, but yes, not enough. And what I mean with this, it's like I can have all my data, but if I have all my data stored across 100 USB keys, this data is not functional for me. This data cannot be reused. It would be just a fact of me having the data, an unusable data. So right now, as for the Fairdrive protocol, as I said, Fairdrive project started as a sandbox, as an R&D experimentation to connect with like-minded projects, to foster also, to strengthen the relationships between infrastructure and the application layer. And now we have come to the stage where we are going one level up. In Q3, relatively soon, there will be the first official proposal of the protocol, and this will also kickstart the Fairdrive improvement proposals process. This will be the first improvement proposal, and in Chert's description, Chert is leading these efforts. The Fairdrive improvement process is essentially a request for comments process for the Fairdrive and Fairdata stack. So, so much for now about the Fairdrive protocol. The other part, as I mentioned, is the app. It's the front end. It's again experimentation, how how to actually provide a meaningful and quality user experience to the users, because it's also the other part, and this is kind of going already into the heart of the topic of today's talk. It's about how to also grow adoption of the new paradigm, not just a single app. It's about how can we make this societal change towards a fair data economy instead of a combination of surveillance capitalism and dopamine economy. It's Fairdrive Deb is being developed as a fellowship, the first fellowship, Swarm Fellowship, with the amazing team at Dinam Labs. And Mustafa, after my talk, will give a demo where we are at now and how to easily integrate it, connect it to your DApp. As also mentioned, it's a fair data economy sandbox. Currently, it builds on FairOS, which is another project where we are developing support, ecosystem-driven support for better and easier managing of the data. But as mentioned, it's just the first personal data store. In Fairdrive protocol itself is aimed to start to enable that there can be a multitude of personal data stores, because after all, today we are also not using just one database. Different data, different use cases demand different solutions. And it would be quite arrogant to think that there's a one-size-fits-all solution. So Fairdrive Deb for the user, it returns them the agency over their data. It can be seen as a gateway to Web3 personal data stores. And in a way, it's quite a boring dApp. I mean, usually one should not say this, but it's a boring dApp with a familiar UX, and it should be. And what I mean with this is, I don't think that anybody bought a Mac because of the Finder app, or anybody bought a Windows PC because of the File Explorer. It's these kind of apps are kind of taken for granted. We don't notice them, but they for the user experience of using a computer, they're essential. At the same time, when we think about them, the file explorers or finders, they're like a central to your computer. They connect all the applications you have installed on your computer. You see, you have a PDF file, there's an Acrobat reader icon, you double click it and it opens a PDF reader. You see an MP3 file, it opens an MP3 player, etc. You see like a video file and so forth. So it's something that we believe needs to exist. It needs to empower the users, but it's not a dApp that needs to be used over and over. It's not where we are really, in this sense, productive. Another thing, what I wrote here is that it needs to have familiar UX. So this is important because as users, we do have a threshold. It's like in some articles or literature, it said it's saying that when we develop dApps, or no, it actually says when we develop apps, it's not referring to dApps, the gain needs to be bigger than the pain. So the users need to perceive that they get from an app more than what they need to invest into understanding and being able to use that particular app. It's also another guidance is if we want to see better adoption of the solutions that we develop, there should be only one user habit changed at once. And we see this also as another thing, what we can learn from Ethereum. We see how many users drop off because they need to install MetaMask. It's just sometimes too big of a leap. That's why we believe on this front that there should be a familiar, very, well, boring UX, one that we know. On the other side, what's not boring is already the engaging conversations that we have. There are several projects that already use Fairdrive or are exploring how to integrate it, how this data can flow left and forth. And this would be also here an opportunity to give a call to action. If you're developing your own DApp, ping us, contact us, apply for a grant. We would be very happy to support you. All right, some demo time, just to give you a little kind of taste of where we're at. So I need to stop this screen share and start another one. Just bear with me. Where do I have it? Here. All right. So what we see here, and I need to move a little bit the zoom controls because I cannot access. What we see here is, for those who are using HackMD, quite familiar interface. It's a markdown editor. I can basically just write something, and it's like it's rendering the markdown on the other side. I can do actually a bit more. So I can just log into Fairdrive, and I select my pod. Then I go to load files. Here's a bunch of files, and before this talk, I just created for fun a short markdown file that basically gives the overview of what's the content of my talk. Now, just a second. It's like, again, the zoom is kind of interfering with the access. So that I switch the tabs. I can, at the same time, I can just go to Fairdrive. So here I log in. Here, I actually prefer the daylight theme. I go here, select my data pod, and again, oh yeah, zoom. So here, if let me also close this. So here I can see the summer school. I can download the markdown file. It's been saved into my Fairdrive. I won't be downloading the file now because yeah, I would need to then again switch screens and all this. Now we are also working on developing a photo DApp. So here I can also log into the photo DApp, all with the same accounts. I go to my pod and I see the picture. If it's the only photo I have uploaded here, if I go back to Fairdrive, there should be also the same. Oh, so here we saw just a quick demo where we're at. It's a lot of experimentation. It's quite exciting, and essentially DApp developers can get this very quickly out of the box. Okay, you can use it, and this is also the beginning of exploring how to provide some of the backend services to DApp developers. In the talk after me, Mustafa will actually give a workshop and give a hands-on example and show how you can use it. It's not difficult, and I encourage everybody to try. So let me switch now back to my slides. Here, just a second. All right, we're back. So now we got the overview. We got the overview a little bit. We saw okay, the Fairdata stack, how we can kind of mentally perceive different layers. Granted, there's also always the delineations between these layers are not strict. It's more fuzzy. It's but it helps us to think in terms of how we can develop. And this also echoes with what previous speakers have been saying, and the paradigm change, how dApp developers can quickly start developing their own dApps. It's instead of when we saw at the beginnings of the Ethereum, every project needed and spent quite a lot of time in developing just their own crypto wallet. And then we saw quite a lot of effort, for example, just went into standardization of QR codes for scanning the Ethereum addresses, like quite minor things. And collectively, we shouldn't be losing time on that. We can see that we should be actually tackling this collectively from the start. And this is why the FIPs, the Fairdrive improvement proposals. So now comes here like the slide, how you can grow your dApp adoption with Fairdrive. And we are speaking here about adoption because this is quite a big pain point for, I would argue, everybody in the decentralized space. It's not just a scalability problem, it's the problem that I mentioned before, that users don't really like applications that present bigger pain than the gain. And if we take into account the confessional culture that we are living in, where we actually say that privacy is important, but we don't care so much about the privacy, the hurdles to adoption become a lot more apparent. So essentially, here we also need to have the understanding, as I said before, we are all in this kind of together. It's like we are building this paradigm shift. It's we should also then be thinking how we can leverage collaboration for, well, mutual success and positive social impact. So by using Fairdrive, basically out of the box, developers can introduce freedom, control, and interoperability to their projects, merging convenience with decentralization. At the same time, you can essentially piggyback on Swarm's ecosystem efforts. We can, the more there are of us, the more we work together, the louder our voice. Then we can see network effects. It's essentially the example that I gave with the Finder dApp. So if you're creating PDF reader, you will be able in future to link that your dApp to the PDF file. And this means that already existing users will have the option to essentially just double click on a PDF, and in a new tab, your dApp opens. So, and the same works also in the opposite way. In this sense, we can also, through the Fairdrive improvement proposals, we can think about, and standards, we can think about how these data Legos can connect. And all this can help you that also your dApp is more visible in the ecosystem, while also having instant access to new backend features. I can totally imagine there will be dApps that connect to Fairdrive, link to the projects that Victor mentioned, and actually Victor also mentioned the Waggle project. Waggle project already team looked into and connected their project to Fairdrive. So it can offer quite a frictionless experience for the developers and for the users. Now, moreover, if you speak about if I touch upon again the open resource paradigm, where Victor was mentioning how easy it is to fork dApps, to fork code, this will be here an example of an easy recipe. Take something that you want to build, look at the open source community, connect it to Fairdrive, and voila, you have a self-sovereign dApp respecting human rights, respecting privacy, and basically pushing the boundaries, pushing towards a fairer data society. So what are the next steps? Next steps, as mentioned, is the Fairdrive protocol proposal. Then starting with that is the Fairdrive improvement proposal process. There will be more integrations, and all this is essentially where we are working towards a production release. Once we are ready to do the production release, there is also the wider community that we are planning to address, and we start hopefully with bigger onboarding of users onto Swarm. As for other steps in this regard, be sure to check out. We will be announcing some details already at the end of the summer school, but there will be a lot more communication regarding a hackathon, Fairdata Society hackathon, that will happen in the last week of October. We are also planning the so-called the Great Data Upload Ecosystem Initiative to get the data buzzing around. So to conclude my talk, what does future hold? In the talk right now, I showed only connections like this dApp connecting to Fairdrive, and it stops here. But let's maybe explore a bit how data interoperability can create something better. If we now mentally return to the Markdown editor that we call Dracula, Markdown editor, the name it's been basically done by the open resource on the open resource recipe. We took already the open source Markdown editor code. We took the open source Dracula theme, hence the name, and we connected it to Fairdrive. But okay, we use that, and maybe I can, in that Markdown editor, I can make my notes. I can make a note in a similar way as for those who are maybe using knowledge management tools like Rome Research or Obsidian or other tools that are emerging. I could write there my task or notes. Organize a trip to the next DEF CON. As a next heading, it could be I would enter the date. Next bullet point would be flight, and I would leave that flight empty. The next bullet point would be hotel. I would leave that hotel empty, and I would save that. Then maybe I could open another dApp, like on the previous events there was a demo of a dApp called ethswarm, which is about decentralized marketplaces, and it's all running client side and in privacy centric mode. That dApp could basically read this file and create basically a customized offers for me, just reading from the tasks that I enter them somewhere else. And while I browse and maybe use their Tinder-like interface, I show, like, I select, I like this hotel, I don't like this hotel, I like these flights, I like that offering. These kind of preferences could be saved back into Fairdrive. And maybe in this way, I open another app that can read those preferences and fit from it and create me a more personalized experience. Here, I would also argue that doing this in the privacy of a home, so to speak, can actually increase the user experience because we feel more free. We feel that there's no mental kung fu needed, thinking like, should I click on this and what will the people behind think about it? What will the algorithms do? Who will know all this and things like that? So if we think even further, because we are in a decentralized space, the idea, and we see the power of the incentives, as mentioned also before on the slides, we can think about that this can enable new business models. If we add a crypto economics layer on it, there could be, if one dApp uses data from the other dApp, maybe it can, in this or the other way, it can compensate this as a microtransaction to the other one. Maybe here we see how it can connect to decentralized service networks that Victor was speaking about. So we start to see how technology can start working for us, how data can start working for us. And with this, I would actually conclude my talk. Here are some links. Test out Fairdrive, go to fairdrive.fairdatasociety.org. Test out other mini dApps to see how maybe to use, to see how it's implemented. All the code is available on GitHub. Just check it out. To conclude, maybe, so the key takeaways that I'd be happy for you to take home would be: find your sweet spot in the Fairdata stack. If you're a protocol development, hopefully you see what the value propositions can be. If you're a DApp developer, same thing. If you're doing both, again, it's it can help you. It can help you also how to form a product. It can address questions like when, as Melanie was speaking about the no profit VCs. It's clearly that maybe the protocols, I would argue they need to be open, free, scalable. Also, as Michel was explaining, they need to foster data interoperability, and therefore they actually shouldn't be really for profit. They shouldn't be privatized. But on the other side, it's like you can be opinionated through creating your depth, to creating your unique selling proposition to address the users. Maybe you create the best MP3 player, or start working with data in such a way that enriches people's lives. Maybe you can connect to other decentralized service networks, or start very simply with the API when it's API there on your own. So the other takeaway is developing your dApp with Fairdrive is faster. This is, again, this echoes what also Robert said, part of Elad's talk, where he said, like, think it's going to take time for developing your dApp. So think in terms, when I develop my dApp, where will Swarm be at that time? And right now, Elad was actually quite verbal and specific, saying, like, don't work on the chunk store unless you're developing a protocol. It can lower, Fairdrive can lower your costs of development in this sense. By being part of the ecosystem, by collaborating, it can also be helpful to grow your adoption, because we're in this together, and this is bigger than us. So with this, thank you for your participation, and I would just say, build your dApp on Swarm. And Robert, back to you.
Thank you, Gregor. I don't have much to add to that shout out, actually. So again, I'd like to stress, if there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom channel, or ask it via the Q&A section, or even on the Discord channel. Feel free. But I think your presentation was quite clear on the motives where we're going, and how we're trying to facilitate this interoperability for a fair data society and a fair data economy. So given that,
maybe Robert, here it said, these days it's been amazing talks by others, and there was also a lot of times where the questions, the problems of funding. So maybe here it's also, again, a reminder that we do have our grants call open, and that projects can actually are most welcome to apply for a grant, to learn about how to use Fairdrive, or just do their own thing or contribute. So yeah, I would just invite everybody, yeah, to work with us.
Definitely. And if you have any questions about the procedure or the ecosystem, feel free to ask us in the Discord channels, or even you can mail us directly also at summerschool2021@ethswarm.org. I will put the address as well in the chat.